Imagine standing on the shore of a vast and turbulent ocean, watching the waves rise and fall in a rhythmic dance that never seems to end. Our minds are much like this ocean, constantly shifting between states of calm and storm, driven by winds of thought and emotion that we often do not understand. We spend most of our lives reacting to these waves, trying to hold on to the pleasant moments while desperately pushing away the painful ones. This struggle is exhausting, and it often leaves us feeling powerless against the currents of our own experience. But what if there was a way to look beneath the surface and see the very mechanics of how these waves are formed? The Buddha taught a profound principle known as dependent origination, a map of the human psyche that reveals the interconnected web of causes that lead to suffering and the possibility of true mental perception. By understanding this ancient wisdom, we can begin to see that we are not our reactions, but rather the space in which they occur. Evolution has gifted us with a brain designed for survival, not for enlightenment. For millions of years, our ancestors were shaped by the need to find food, avoid predators, and secure a place within the tribe. This biological heritage created a mind that is constantly scanning for threats and opportunities, a mind that perceives the world through a lens of lack and desire. When the Buddha spoke of dependent origination, he was describing the mechanics of this very process, showing how one state of being leads inevitably to the next in a closed loop of dissatisfaction. It begins with a fundamental lack of clarity, a misunderstanding of how things truly exist. We see the world as a collection of separate, solid objects, and we see ourselves as a permanent observer inside our own heads. This initial ignorance acts as the soil in which the seeds of our habits are planted. From this soil grow the mental formations, those deep-seated patterns of thinking and reacting that we have repeated since childhood. These patterns then shape our consciousness, which in turn defines how we perceive our physical form and our mental identity. We are like weavers who have forgotten we are holding the loom, becoming caught in the very fabric we have created. As our senses interact with the environment, they produce contact, and from contact comes feeling. This feeling is often just a simple pulse of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral energy, yet our mind immediately attaches a story to it. If a sensation is pleasant, we reach for it. If it is unpleasant, we push it away. This reaching and pushing is the essence of craving, a thirst that can never be fully quenched because the objects we desire are themselves constantly changing and dissolving. This is the machinery of suffering that operates beneath the surface of our daily lives, driving our anxieties and our endless search for something more. When we do not see this process clearly, we are bound to it. We become like a person trying to catch the wind with a net, growing more frustrated with every failed attempt. To understand dependent origination is to begin looking at the net itself and realizing that it is made of our own misconceptions. This is not a matter of faith, but of direct observation of how the mind moves from one moment to the next. By witnessing the chain of causation, we start to find the small gaps where we can stop reacting and start seeing. This seeing is the first step toward building a mindset of interdependence that is not based on ignoring pain, but on understanding its source. We realize that we are not the victims of a cruel fate, but the participants in a complex system of cause and effect that can be mastered through awareness. We begin to see that every thought and every emotion is a conditioned response that can be unlearned through the power of steady observation and a compassionate heart. By noticing the very moment that a feeling turns into a craving, we find the exit door from the cycle of frustration. This is how we begin to open the mind to a reality that is far more vast and peaceful than the narrow confines of the egoic world we have inhabited for so long. The sense of being a central character in the story of our lives is perhaps the most powerful illusion we face. We feel as though there is a solid and unchanging self residing somewhere inside us, looking out at a world that is separate and distinct. Modern psychology often refers to this as the narrative self, the part of the brain that constantly weaves together our memories, our plans, and our current experiences into a coherent biography. This narrative is useful for navigating the social world, but it becomes a source of great suffering when we mistake the story for the reality of who we are. In the light of dependent origination, we see that the self is not a fixed thing, but a process that arises from moment to moment based on conditions. It is like the flame of a candle that looks the same from one minute to the next, but is actually a continuous flow of burning wax and oxygen. When we look closely at our experience, we find that there is no single part of us that remains constant. Our bodies are constantly changing. Our emotions are like passing weather patterns, and our thoughts are like clouds drifting across the sky. Yet, we spend enormous amounts of energy trying to protect and enhance this temporary image of ourselves. We feel wounded when our ideas are challenged. We feel diminished when we lose social status, and we feel terrified when we face the inevitable reality of our own aging. This is the burden of carrying a heavy suitcase that we refuse to put down even though it is empty. The analysis of our suffering shows us that the root of our anxiety is the attempt to find security in something that is fundamentally insecure. We try to build a permanent home on a foundation of shifting sand. However, this realization is not meant to be depressing, but rather profoundly liberating. If the self is a process rather than a thing, then it is something that can be observed and understood. We can begin to see the gap between a feeling and our reaction to it. Usually, when we feel a sting of rejection or a surge of anger, we immediately identify with it and say, "I am angry" or "I am hurt." This identification is what triggers the chain of craving and clinging. But if we can pause at the moment of feeling, we can notice the sensation as just a sensation, a physical pressure in the chest or a heat in the face. By simply witnessing the sensation without adding the story of the self to it, the chain begins to lose its power over us. We find a new kind of equanimity that does not depend on everything going our way, but on our ability to remain present with whatever arises. This is the critical shift from being a prisoner of our biological reactions to being a conscious observer of the mind. We begin to recognize that our thoughts are not commands, but merely suggestions from an ancient brain that is still trying to survive in a modern world. As we deconstruct the illusion of the solid self, we find that we are not shrinking, but expanding into a larger sense of awareness that is not confined by the narrow interests of the ego. This awareness is the quiet center of the storm, a place of refuge that is always available once we stop trying to control the waves. It is through this clear analysis that we finally begin to step through the door of the mind and into a world of genuine peace. The world we inhabit today is meticulously designed to exploit the very vulnerabilities the Buddha identified over 2,500 years ago. We live in an era of hyperstimulation where every screen and every notification is a calculated attempt to trigger our biological drives. From the perspective of evolutionary psychology, our ancestors, who were the most sensitive to new information and social rewards, were the ones who survived and passed on their genes. Today, this ancient survival mechanism is being hijacked by algorithms that profit from our constant state of craving and distraction. This is the modern manifestation of the cycle of dependent origination happening at lightning speed. We receive a digital signal, which is contact, followed by a tiny hit of dopamine, which is feeling, leading immediately to the desire for the next hit, which is craving. If we are not careful, we spend our entire lives trapped in this loop, never finding true satisfaction because we are constantly chasing a ghost. Our culture often tells us that the solution to our discontent is to find better objects of desire, more money, more recognition, or more intense experiences. But the Buddha's critique of the human condition goes deeper, suggesting that the problem is not the object we are chasing, but the very nature of the chase itself. We are like someone who is thirsty and drinks salt water, only to find their thirst increasing with every gulp. This systemic addiction to external validation and sensory pleasure keeps the mind in a state of perpetual agitation. It prevents us from ever being fully present in our own lives or truly connected to the people around us. We have become a society that knows how to consume but has forgotten how to be. We mistake comfort for peace and stimulation for happiness. But the reality is that these things are fleeting and fragile. When we look at our modern life through the lens of reason and critical reflection, we see that we are often working against our own well-being. We create immense stress for ourselves by clinging to identities that are nothing more than mental constructs. We compete with one another for resources that can never offer lasting security, and we ignore the deep interconnectedness that binds all of us together. This ignorance is not just a personal failing, but a collective one, a shared misunderstanding of what it means to be a human being. By recognizing the ways in which our current environment feeds our suffering, we can begin to cultivate a healthy skepticism toward the messages we receive from the outside world. We can start to see through the illusions of the marketplace and the ego, choosing instead to focus on the internal work of clarifying the mind and tempering the fires of craving. This is not about rejecting the world, but about living in it with a different kind of awareness. An awareness that is not easily swayed by the winds of trend and opinion. It is a call to take responsibility for our own mental state and to stop looking for salvation in the very things that cause our distress. Only when we stop playing the game by the rules of the ego can we find the door to a more authentic and resilient way of living. To apply the wisdom of dependent origination is to begin the work of reclaiming our own minds from the forces of habit and conditioning. It is a practical training in inner strength that allows us to stand unshakable in the face of life's inevitable challenges. When we understand that everything arises from conditions, we stop taking our suffering so personally. We realize that a difficult emotion or a stressful thought is not a permanent feature of who we are, but a temporary phenomenon that has appeared because the necessary conditions were present. This shift in perspective gives us the space to breathe and to choose a more skillful response. Instead of being swept away by a wave of anger at a colleague or a feeling of inadequacy in our personal relationships, we can pause and see the chain of causation as it unfolds. This pause is where our true power lies. It is the moment where we can decide not to feed the craving and not to strengthen the habit of clinging. Over time, this practice of clarity and mindfulness transforms our daily life into a laboratory of self-discovery. We begin to bring the same level of attention to our work, our conversations, and even our moments of solitude. We find that we are more present for others because we are no longer so preoccupied with defending our own egoic territory. We find that we are more effective in our work because we can see situations clearly without the distortion of personal bias and fear. This is the ultimate freedom that the Buddha spoke of. A freedom that is not dependent on changing the world around us, but on changing the way we relate to it. We no longer require the world to be a certain way for us to be at peace. We have found a source of stability within ourselves that is not built on the shifting sands of external circumstances. This inner resilience is not a cold or detached state, but one of deep compassion and warmth. As we see how our own suffering is caused by ignorance and craving, we begin to see the same process happening in everyone else. Our judgment of others is replaced by an understanding of the common struggle we all face as biological beings with complex minds. We see that everyone is just trying to find happiness in their own confused way, and this recognition naturally leads to a more kind and patient way of interacting with the world. The door of the mind is not opened by force or by intellectual willpower, but by the gentle and persistent light of awareness. It is opened every time we choose to see things as they really are rather than as we want them to be. By walking through this door, we leave behind the narrow prison of the self and step into a reality that is vast, interconnected, and profoundly peaceful. This is the invitation of the Buddha's teachings, a path that leads away from the exhaustion of the struggle and toward the quiet joy of a clear and open heart. As you move back into the rhythms of your day, take with you the simple practice of observing the links in the chain. Notice the moments of contact, the rise of feeling, and the subtle tug of craving. You do not need to do anything spectacular to begin this journey. You only need to maintain a quiet and honest presence with your own experience. Remember that the waves of the ocean will always rise and fall, but you have the capacity to understand the wind and the depths. May you find the strength to see clearly, the courage to let go of what is false, and the peace of a mind that is truly awake. This is the gift of awareness that remains with you always,